My name is Eric Strom, Director of Support Management at Lamar University. Welcome to our first fall webinar. Change in substance a bit as we focus on more process than a specific content. As we explore how to achieve more effective applied research for both the research team and the client. Research is important to the Center for Port Management. Our vision captures or focuses on exploring ways to better prepare the port and marine terminal industry for the challenges and opportunities ahead through advanced research, through advanced education and research. We are pleased to have join us at this point 2 industry experts. We're hoping to have the third call in any minute now. And while I will say that while the context, certainly from the center's perspective, is port and maritime, we envision that the discussion will be applicable to any field. I will ask the speakers to self-introduce. I will add that they are all Lamar graduates, so we're pleased to show our colors. The format is roundtable. Microsoft Teams and other platforms, I think we've had more than enough experience with over the past number of months. Interaction can be a little difficult, but you can see the chat bar and raising your hand, and we will try to keep our knees flexed and accommodate questions and comments as we go through. But clearly the value of this will be through interactivity. Most of you, aside from our outside speakers, have engaged in applied research, and we look to you as well for the best practices and lessons learned that you can bring to the group. I will thank Candace for organizing this get together. Candace Moore is the Center's Deputy Director and does a great job. So with that, let's turn to Larry Kelly, the Director of the Port of Port Arthur, to get us started.
Well, Eric, thank you so much, and Candace, thank you again. It's obviously it's distance, but it's great seeing you again and having an opportunity to visit. First, I know you allotted something like 15 or 20 minutes. It's not going to take that long. And I'll run to the heart of the mission. It's going to be results oriented and results focused. And just allow me to make a brief introduction, and then I'll jump right into some of the meat of it. But please wave, stop, Larry, whatever, to discuss, because I think it's probably best that we do it in that fashion. But I'm gonna roll through some material, and then may actually prompt some ideas or thoughts. But no, thank you very much, Larry Kelly. I'm the Port Director and CEO for the Port of Port Arthur. I've worked at the port for about 12 years, serving about 3 years as the executive director. Prior to that, I spent about 18 years in the third-party logistics industry in the private sector, serving mostly the energy and the forestry sector. And proud to say that I'm a Lamar alum. I have a business degree with a concentration in industrial engineering as my undergrad, and I have a master's in public administration and recently a master's of science in port and terminal management. I'm proud of that point. I served, and I'll kind of stop there for a second. I served on an advisory committee during the formulation of this, and talking with Brian several years ago, and then as Eric came online, then once it got started, I thought I'd just put my money where my mouth was and enroll in the program, and very proud to say I was the first graduate. It's probably the first thing I've ever been at, because I'll be happy to share with you, having this many PhDs staring at me right now is a little bit like meeting your preacher at Walmart, or your principal after you get out of high school or something like that. Because I was not a stellar student, never pretended to be, but certainly a very interested individual. Worked my way through college and continued to work ever since. I will say two things about the Master's in Port and Terminal Management. I saw it from its very almost just after the concept of it, but early on. My very first class was just a few days after Harvey, and it was almost guess where Larry is at today. And it started with a house with gutted sheetrock, and the next time they saw me in a trailer in the front yard. But we persevered and got through the program. I have to say I'm back in the house by that point. But to me, Lamar is a bit of an untapped resource. I believe in the college, and I think that's evident. I believe there's a number of opportunities to enhance the perception of the university, but it takes effort. And I think it takes alumni effort. I think it takes close associated industry effort, and obviously the efforts of the academia, and staff for the university. And I'll come back to that, but a little bit about the port, because maybe this will spawn an idea. And I think, Eric, I think you're correct. I don't believe it's limited just to port and terminal management, although most of the industries in this area have a marine terminal, and if not, they're somehow connected to a marine terminal. So I do think there is that important part. But at the Port of Port Arthur, there are only 19 of us, and we have an administrative staff of 8. Of the 8, 6 have undergraduate degrees from Lamar, 3 with advanced or second degrees from Lamar University in various disciplines. Business, both accounting. Our director of accounting is obviously a CPA and a Lamar grad. We have a director of finance. And then many of you know Ed Long. His undergrad is from A&M, but he got over it and got a engineering degree from Lamar University. And he certainly makes a huge contribution to our modest-sized port. And then we have our director of trade is also a graduate of Lamar University. So again, trying to put our money where our mouth is, we recruit from Lamar, and we're in the process of recruiting another individual here for public affairs, and we're going to certainly look to Lamar for that. We're a multimodal port facility. If you kind of think about it, and I joke about it sometimes, we're a nexus where road, rail, pipelines all meet, and we just happen to be very, very close to the water. And in our waterborne commerce, it's largely deep draft vessels, global trade, and then we do handle some barge-related traffic. Some of the commodities we handle, predominantly forest products, eucalyptus pulp from South America. That's an import, and I'm just here to say, despite your consumer-based shortages for paper towels and toilet paper and everything else, it doesn't really exist. We have, I think, a pretty good supply here for those of you that have toured the port. We export craft linerboard, which is used in box manufacturing. It's manufactured in the United States. It's railed in, rail-centric, goes out by vessel. We handle a significant volume of imported dimensional lumber, fence pickets, and then we also handle as break bulk metals, steel, and aluminum, which I think we account for about 10 to 15% of what's exported out of Argentina to the United States. We handle in aluminum, liquid energy. We export diesel, predominantly to South America, but to Europe and to the Caribbean. We handle a significant volume of project cargo, helping our area industry, these billions and billions of dollars of expansion that are either in the works or have been slightly paused, perhaps due to the economic conditions, or in the planning stages. A lot of that cargo will actually touch our port, and we'll do heavy lift work. So we do a lot of support to the energy sector in Southeast Texas. And the other thing, and we're certainly very proud of, is our role with the United States military. We are a member of the National Port Readiness Network and MARAD designated strategic seaport. And just on the heels of coming off a fairly large military operation, which provided training support to the U.S. Army. And so you bundle it all together, and we're a pretty active place for fairly small, as far as in terms of property size port. We have about $130 million capital expansion plan underway. The marine construction constitutes about 1,600 feet of it, and about 75 million or 80 million, $85 million of that. We have a considerable amount of civil land construction supporting the backlands of these docks, including lay down and an additional rail for the facility. We have building rehabilitations going on. And the most important part of this is maintaining a state of good repair while we sustain operations. So why do I say all that? Is it takes a lot to make that happen. And I mentioned there's only 18 or 19 of us here to do that. And so we depend heavily on relationships with consultants. We depend heavily on utilizing best practices. And I think there's opportunity here for perhaps some of the research to assist this. And I think hopefully it could be done as a symbiotic relationship where there's mutual benefit for the university and the professors and the students in this effort. And so I see that there's some challenges and needs that go on here, and I'm gonna rattle on just a little bit, and then I'll find a stopping place here. But I mentioned we hire a lot of disciplines outside of this. We consult with attorneys, accountants, engineers, many disciplines of engineers in a marine construction environment. It's and seen as a structural guy, and he can tell you far better than me. It's not easy. And the best that constructed product ever looks is the day you finish it. And we spend the life of the project. A lot of these are built out to 50 years and utilize probably double of that. We're in a saltwater, or even worse, a splash zone environment where you've got brackish water on a lot of steel surfaces. We have concrete that has a tremendous exposure, all under live loads. And if you look at how a dock is constructed, it's essentially a table stuck out in the water. And the areas where you try to separate the land from the water, it's not dry and wet. It's kind of somewhere in between. So I paint a picture of a very highly corrosive environment. Maintaining a state of good repair is exceptionally tough. And we're looking for ways to try to improve on that. And Eric's a huge advocate on asset management. This is a subcomponent of that. I think there's a number of other areas, and I throw these things out there, hopefully perhaps to stimulate a little bit of thought. But we regularly are reaching out for geotech, for dredging, which I'm happy to say we're working with Lamar now on a study on siltation. Dr. Gian, if I say it properly, we're working on structural analysis, corrosion protection, which I've mentioned, cathodic protection, and then on the other side of the business house, cyber security and network design is a huge factor in the port's activity. To move on, we also have a lot of relationships with a lot of the alphabet soup of federal entities, not to mention, especially at the federal level, the Army Corps of Engineers, DHS, FEMA, the Department of Energy, EPA, and at state level, obviously TCQ and GLO, just to name a few. And so what I see is there's some areas for potential study. And I've got a laundry list here, and I'm just going to cherry pick. I mean, siltation, we're already working on now. This is a huge cost to the port. I think last year we spent almost $3 million on removing silt in front of the port. If we can figure out a better process to doing that, obviously we deliver value back to our taxpayers. Hydrodynamic impacts of the waterway. We got a channel that's about to be deepened. That's about a $1.2 billion project. And there's something like on the order of almost 90 docks on our waterway and something like 30 different terminals. Not only us, but a lot of other people are going to have impacts as this waterway continues to change and grow. We have other ideas and projects related to soil stabilization, resiliency. Eric, I know you've been a big advocate on resiliency related projects. asset management, asset valuation, decidedly two different topics there, value engineering, economic impact. We, on a regular occasion, go out every 3 years or so and perform an economic impact study. And I'm going to come back a little bit later. And I know Eric and Sina both heard my complaints about that. Excuse me. And I'll touch on it in a minute, but benefit cost is another one. And I think this is another great success story between the Port-to-Port author and Lamar University. We worked with Dr. Zaloom and Dr. Marquez on a benefit cost analysis. And I stop right there just a little bit to talk about grantsmanship. I've been with the port about 12 years and actively participated in about $36 million worth of grants. And I've watched them evolve. And it's from multiple different entities. U.S. Department of Transportation has been one, obviously FEMA, Department of Homeland Security, but even within TxDOT, we've had an active grant program. A myriad of other things, and we can touch them all later, but I've got several different avenues that we can look at, and we've talked about GIS and other methods to look at enhancing productivity within ports. But I just throw those out there. I want to shift a little bit briefly to what is perhaps perceived, and I'm switching gears here. And again, I'm not a great student. I'll be the first one to tell you. Now, I don't quit and I don't give up, but and it's hard for me to come back and talk in terms of constructive criticism, but I want to do it more from working as a customer and also as a vendor. And there's that relationship that exists there. And I think there's some perception at times that there may be a lack of customer focus. And I want to put it in terms of these are opportunities to excel. I'm back in Lamar in the mid 80s, to avoid playing tennis or volleyball or something like that. I took ROTC, and there was a major there, and we had a test, and he determined it was an opportunity to excel, not a test. I thought, okay, that's pretty good, and I've used and abused that statement quite a bit. And so I'd like for us to look at it. These are opportunities to excel. Having a strong customer focus, the ability to meet deadlines and deliverables. I know that, and I don't know who the other person that joined us, but I know Sina, as a consulting engineer, it's always about the deadline and the deliverable. And what does that deliverable look like? Is it usable? And my experience, and I'll tell you, I'm gonna share a good experience. My experience with the benefit cost analysis was customer driven. It met the deadline, and guess what? Achieved the goal. And at the end of the day, the grant is about 9.6 or 7 million of about a $14 million project. So we got it across the goal line. And again, hats off to Dr. Marquez and Dr. Zaloom. And I know that Dr. Craig and Eric were deeply involved in that. I think a second part of that is a customer client focus on the value proposition. And I think that's a very important part for professors to demonstrate leadership within each of their own disciplines to help identify with industry what opportunities exist for study. Active engagements with industry to identify opportunities to solve certain I'm going to use problems, challenges, or whatever. And this is where personally I want to offer to assist. And I'll tell you, Eric, I attend the SETWAC, Southeast Texas Waterway Advisory Committee, and I chaired it a number of years ago. I'm telling you, he's out there advocating for these research efforts. We need help on getting an industry response. And maybe we don't have the right people in the room all the time to make that pitch, but I think that's certainly one avenue. And I think there's other organizations or entities that we can probably put perhaps this group in front of to try to assist with that. And I think that's where there's a shared role here. I think also, and I look at this more from a customer as being a student at Lamar, although a long time ago, is identifying student prospects and working with them to work on problems. And I can see a pipeline that probably needs to be identified. And I know we're not reinventing the wheel here. This has gone on for quite some time, but I know that they need a lot of oversight, and they need guidance, and they need interim goals to help finish these type projects. And this is more on a personal basis, and I see it in developing some of our own employees. They need wins, and the program needs wins early and often to develop and promote that effort. I think things like case studies or analyses with beneficial, usable results are really important. I think after the fact, once it's all over, I think there's some sizzle, some marketing side of that needs to happen to tout the completions, but only after it's completed. And I think you build a list of projects, and I'd hope that you spend your day thinking about things, about problems that we can solve, and you may have a laundry list, and perhaps you're waiting for the right graduate candidate or senior candidate or whatever to put onto that project. But I think we, as the industry sector, can help feed that and provide that information. And I think there's the onus on us, but we've got to figure out a way to work together to help drive what that list looks like. And I'm gonna use the term a list. And then almost in closing here, guys, I appreciate you bearing with me because I put a lot of thought into this. This is really important. I see this as the first of these meetings, and I'm glad that it's being recorded. Hopefully others can perhaps benefit from it. And this is where I turn the corner and really get kind of focused on it. And it has to be results driven. Same as I'd ask for in a project, and I'm gonna pick on Cena here again. Let's say we were to contract with him. What our expectation is at the end of the day, it needs to be a deliberate result that leads to recommendations and action that we can take or decide to take or not take or whatever, but it's certainly defendable. And that's the meat. And so I'm gonna talk in the terms of the steak and the sizzle. And I'll tell you, Cena is a consummate professional. He's the standard that many others should follow, which implies that there's many others out there that don't follow that. And I've experienced that, and I'll digress just for one second. I've seen consultants copy and paste, and I'm sure professors, you've all had students that it's pretty evident that they just went and copied and pasted. I have a huge problem if it's plagiarism. I mean, that's that's academic dishonesty. But in the professional world, I'll give you an honest to goodness example of seeing drawings and specifications where I saw the specifications that were just opened up and did not copy and paste, but where you do copy and replace. And they used another port entity and just substituted our name in there and didn't do enough QA/QC on it to go back and not pick up that. And I just use that as an example. That's just on the top. Once you got into the document, told me there was no quality assurance in there that went back and verified that it was a valid document. It was just something that was got out the door. And we had huge problems on that project, and I really regret to even say that, but I think that's an important point. If I can use that as an example, that the meat has to be there. There needs to be more steak than sizzle. The other side of that is when you see a finished product and it's just a really nice PowerPoint, and we've had that before our commission, and we're writing big checks to these guys, and where there's just kind of too much of that PowerPoint show. And there's some really large firms out there that do that. And I use this, and I'm trying to avoid that there's two hats here. There's obviously a relationship we're going to continue to have where we engage with professionals to accomplish this, but I think there's an opportunity that can be learned from that of what that relationship should look like. And it needs to be important. And I think a key to that, and this is kind of rounding home here, is good and open communications. Without a doubt, a faculty understanding of what the client actually needs, and for the client to appreciate what the research team needs. And a lot of times it involves a lot of data, right? And I think this match is essential. A pitfall to that is avoiding, and I see this, and I'm not trying to put it delicately, because Cena knows me well enough. Neither of us are, or at least I'm not. I won't speak for him. is necessarily politically correct. And I pretty much, I work in a pretty rough environment, and I'm likely to be cussed as much as I am anything else. And it's one of those things where you see where people answer the problems that they want to answer, not the answer to the question that was given. And I see that often in studies, and it's just they go down an easier path to be able to do it. But we're asking hard questions because we can't figure it out ourselves. We're not smart enough. And that's why we're certainly reaching out to academia. So I know that's probably not the polished way of answering that, but it's Larry's way. And I really think the client needs to clearly understand the motivations and the limitations of the college or academia, the professor. You know, does this translate into publishing something? Does this translate into a requirement that the university has to complete a case study or something like that? So I think it's important early on in the communications that this has to be discussed. And so anyway, I'll kind of stop there, and I really want to open up. I probably talked way longer than Larry ever plans to. But I will leave it with this. I think it's important, and I offer this to everyone here. And I know, Miriam, you've certainly been to the port. We offer tours. I think we can arrange something with students even to try to help facilitate this. But I think there's a bigger part of this as far as the outreach to be able to get you ready for prime time, since we've gone down that path of Saturday Night Live references, to be ready for prime time, to be able to go out to area industry and others to help search for these research projects. But I think when it happens, it's kind of like that dog that chases the car. What happens when he catches it, right? You know, you can go out and look for it, and it's like, oh, geez, what are we going to do now that we have it? So I think through deliberation and continued discussion, I think it can help lay a groundwork for once you get that fish in the boat, then what do we do with it after that? So anyway, I've probably ran on a bit long there, but I really appreciate the opportunity, and I think this is an important dialogue. And anyway, Eric, I'll turn it back over to you for further discussion.
Larry, thanks as usual. So many good points that you've made, communication and understanding expectations from both the research team and the client, as well as the consulting partner. I think what I'll do is turn to Sina now. I'm not seeing any hands up at this point, Larry, and get Sina's perspective on this. I will add that our third speaker, Vijay Agrawal, has experienced a pretty serious personal setback and will not be able to join us. But as are you, Larry. He is a member of the Center's Advisory Board and is available to questions, and I will be happy to relay any that any of the faculty might have. So Sina, why don't you give us your perspective from a consultant's perspective on the integration and partnership with academia as you move forward to address the challenges and opportunities that Larry has identified.
Well, great. I would be happy to. First of all, Larry, for somebody who works on a dock, you're pretty eloquent, and I wish I had your English ability. I have about 3 minutes of English, and after that, you guys have to put things together to understand what I'm saying. But anyway, first of all, I want to thank you for inviting me, and I'm delighted to be speaking with you guys. My name is Sina Nejad. I am a Lamar graduate. I have my bachelor's degree and my master's and my doctorate in engineering from Lamar. A big Lamar supporter. I started my relationship with Lamar back in 1979. They barely let me into college, and then I'm so proud that I kind of pushed my way and pushed my way, and all of a sudden I wake up one day. Not only I'm a doctor, I'm the head of the foundation board for Lamar University. So that is something to be proud of for somebody who barely got into the college. I'm also a proud participant in our company. We have just like Larry, about 19 people with us here. They're all of our engineers are Lamar graduates. Our architects, unfortunately, they didn't know any better, so they went to other schools. But we have been very successful for the past 28 years. This company is on its way to be 29 years old now. And we have a great niche in the business as we do a lot of work for our industrial client. We do a lot of structural engineering, we do a lot of architecture, and our little niche is designing blast-resistant buildings for refineries and petrochemical, which has been very successful. We're probably one of the leading companies in retrofitting existing buildings for blast loads. In making it simple, we design covers or buildings to resist the loads that are imposed on the building. Now, on one of my side jobs, other than being on, I think, 9 or 10 different boards, I have the privilege of being the chair of the Texas Board of Professional Engineers and Land Surveyors. We regulate about 72,000 engineers and surveyors in the state of Texas. That is a really, really big thing. I am the first Lamar graduate that was on the board, and the first engineer from Southeast Texas that was on the board, and obviously the first one to be who chairing that board. And I'll be there for another 5 or 6 years. Before I go to anything else, for those of you who are engineers and listening to this, I want you to know that you should be extremely proud that you have chosen the engineering profession. Like I said, we lead 72,000 engineers and land surveyors in Texas. And I would tell you that every disciplinary meeting that we have, we probably don't see but maybe 5 or 6 people due to doing bad stuff that they had to be brought in front of the board for disciplinary. So we have a very clean profession. We have very few engineers that purposefully do the wrong thing. Obviously, when you have 72,000 population, there are a few bad apples here and there, but overall, we're in a great profession. And I want to stop there about myself and what I do and go through some of the experiences that we have with colleges and universities and how I see research in a university setting. This day and age, research is quite a bit different than when I went to school. When I went to Lamar, this is back in late 70s, there was no internet. As a matter of fact, you guys might not believe this, but the first semester that I got to Lamar, I went to the bookstore and they had all the slide rules on sale because HP calculator had just came out. And those of us who had a lot of money, they bought an HP whatever C that had a constant memory. So when you turn it off, it didn't forget what you did the last time. And those of us who didn't have enough money like me, we bought a Texas Instrument calculator. So I did buy every slide rule that they had on sale, and I still have some. Any of you guys, if want to know what a slide rule is, I'll show you one. I can even operate one, I'll be honest with you. So, but let's get to the research side. I want to make this really short and tell you what I think in academia should be providing the industry and those of us that are your customers, and what is it that we shouldn't. Like I said, I want you to know that I'm extremely proud of Lamar University. When I graduated with my bachelor's degree, the next week I found a job and I started with a small engineering company. And I would sincerely tell you that I had no deficiency in my education. And I went to work just like I've been doing this for a long, long time. That's what you need from a school. And that's what I'm hoping Lamar is providing. I'll give you some bad examples and I'm going to give you some good examples. And maybe between both of these, we all go away with some kind of a thought process that maybe as academias, we need to be a little bit more careful in what we lead our students into. First of all, the students these days are not like what we were when we went to school. I had no resources, not me, none of us had any resources. If I was working late at the office and I did not know something, I had to get in my car, drive all the way to Lamar Library, find the book, and page through pages and pages to find my answer. Now, anybody can sit in front of the keyboard and they can find anything from brain surgery onto how tell Larry how to do his job at the port or a lot of other stuff. I mean, I'm not kidding you. You can find just about anything, and there's a lot of bad stuff in there. But you go to, for example, Google Scholar, you find a lot of very valuable information. So what I'm getting at is information is not all that expensive anymore. It's cheap, but good information and good teaching, it becomes more and more difficult. I feel for university professors because back in the day, I could wow people really easy. Now, kids wowing us with all sorts of engineering degrees because they're exposed to a lot more. Some of the research examples, of course, as being a long-term consulting engineer, I get asked to do a lot of stuff with other schools. And being on the board of engineering, I have the privilege of being able to lead a lot of the accreditation groups through universities in Texas. And I see some research that just really hasn't impressed me. And these are not old stuff. These are within the last 3-4 years. I'm going to mention 3 of them, and then we get off of negative and go into the positive. For example, one of the research was, I was listening to this student presentation, making it very simple. The effects of driving through 59 through Houston versus driving through I-10, which one's faster and which one's better? Every one of us has a navigation system in our cars. All the data is available on the internet. Texas Highway Department does all of these researches. I'm not sure how beneficial that is to a lot of us. Now, mind you, every research is important. I want to make sure you understand that. Every research is important. A lot of very, very good inventions came through simple research and researches that did not go anywhere. I'll give you a very short, quick example. Microwave ovens. That was an unintended result of a research that didn't go anywhere and all of a sudden turned into inventing microwave ovens. Real simple. There are hundreds of things like that out there. Now, another research. Effects of scholarship to poor students in third world countries. Well, guys, if you provide tools to people, if you provide them with money, they can do better. They can also abuse it, but the result is kind of known before you even started. The third one was, I was looking at the lab and they were real proud of showing me a lab where they're extruding 1/2-inch fiberglass rods through a machine. This is like a long-term research of this university. Well, guys, you go to Walmart and buy fishing rods that not only they're fiberglass, they're hollow and they're tapered, and they take a hell of a lot of moment load. So what research has to be is something that is going to be innovative, is going to be not seen. When I got my doctorate, the people on my advisory board, they wanted to listen to something they have not heard before. They wanted to see something they haven't seen before. They basically wanted me to invent something. And that's what a good research ought to be. So let me give you a good example. At Lamar University, Dr. Brake at the structural department, he's doing a study on self-draining concrete. You would think that's crazy. How could you make something real porous, something very strong? It might not go anywhere. It might not be economical, but it's a good research, something that we haven't seen out there. He might not be successful in providing that to all the US highways, but there might be other unintended results that would be very useful. So again, every research, every study, it would be good. But what really makes a difference is at Lamar University, a teaching moment should be a wow moment, should be something that is going to attract a lot of outside people, should be something that's people that are listening to you is going to say, wait a minute, I haven't heard that before. This might go somewhere. I really am interested in listening to it. This is something I did not see on Google yesterday. So that's where I think our success ought to be. We have a lot of good students. We just hired another Lamar University, brilliant kid, brilliant. I mean, every one of them is that are here from Lamar are really good engineers, and we're very proud of them. So I'm going to stop and answer any questions that you're going to have. But again, my real advice to the professors that are looking at these is you want to let your student to impress you. You don't want them to validate what you already know. There's going to have to be a partnership of learning between the student and the professor, and having something very, very unique. We're living in an area that, as Larry said, we're on the real edge of really becoming something with a deepening and widening of the river. That is going to be a tremendous asset to this area. And a lot of people don't even understand the importance of it. You look at Port Arthur, you look at ExxonMobil, you look at Port of Beaumont, you look at some of these other places. These guys are really, people don't understand how much a jet fuel comes out of our area. What is it, Larry? 70% of the military jet fuel comes from Golden Triangle?
Yes, sir. Most of the jet fuel and most of the commercial jet fuel, if you could jump on an airliner, and most of the military's jet fuel, which if you think about jet fuel, you think jets and planes. The U.S. Army, all the way down to a four-wheeler, is all fueled by one common fuel. Just think about the logistics that goes into that. Yeah, I think 17% of the nation's diesel exports are on this waterway. Up until just a year or so ago, it was like 95% of the LNG exports came off this waterway out of Cheniere over there. So there's a number of firsts and things that this area produces. And I'll share with you, and not to jump over you there, Sina, is we find a hard time in going to Austin, even, and certainly DC, of just getting these guys to pronounce Sabine and Natchez properly. And so we have collectively, and I think Lamar experiences this too, we've got a little bit of a perception, or how we perceived by the rest of the nation. And Eric, I know you've ran into this certainly with of trying to get the port and terminal management program off the guard. Lamar who, a little bit around the nation. I'm sorry, Sina, but yes, sir, you're right. We're a big producer of a lot of the energy that fuels the world.
Well, nobody says Lamar who to me. I'll slap him. But everybody knows about Lamar University. Seriously, Lamar University used to be, or probably is becoming again. But when I went to school, Lamar was a leading engineering school in Texas. Lamar University had the highest number of registered professional engineers graduating from Lamar University than any other school in Texas. This was back in the days that when I went to school. But again, I promise I'm going to stop, but I'll tell you a little thing about not being able to pronounce Sabine River is I get a call from the guy from Australia. He said, "Oh, Mister, I got a project in Quincy and I got another one in Vidor." So I had to start telling them where Coons and Vidor was. But anyway, I'll be delighted to answer any questions you might have. But again, I just wanted to stress the fact that Lamar is a gem. We have brilliant kids out there. I'm looking forward to kind of incubating them a lot better and under higher pressure to let that strength of brain work come out. Thank you for inviting me, guys, and again, I'll be delighted to answer any questions.
Thanks, Sina. I want to turn to Dr. Craig, but in the spirit of Dean Craig, but in the spirit of our roundtable, I see that Berna Togaz has her hand up, and before I move to Dean Craig, Berna, would you please weigh in with your comment or question?
Yeah, hi. I have a question to Larry. You were saying that there's a soil stabilization. Could you please a little bit around the port, I guess. So could you please a little bit elaborate what is the problem and what kind of studies you're tackling with about it?
Yeah, Berna, thank you so much. And I'll tell you, coming into this job, I was a neophyte at soils and geotechnical information. And I'll tell you, Ed has been a tremendous asset to the port. Ed Long, professional engineer, has been a tremendous asset to the port. And he dumbs it down enough for where I can even understand it. But the simple premise is this: if you just look at our soil conditions here, and we had a development that they put about $30 million worth of assets, and when we were going through the development arrangement, the gentleman was from Denmark, and he says, "Oh, we'll come in and we'll just put the slab down." And I said, "I don't think that's going to work." And it's these large silos that hold 15,000 metric tons, and there's 5 of them here on the property. And I said, "It's not going to work." And he looked at me, he goes, "No, that's how we do it." And I said, "Not around here, you're not." I said, and I pointed, this was when the CEP project was going on with Motiva, and we can see it in the distance. I said, "Do you see that facility over there? It's built on 15,000 concrete piles." And he looked at me and he goes, 15,000? And I said, "Yes." And he goes, "Oh, then we must drive piles." And it was a learning opportunity for him, obviously, but as much for me is on stability of how we construct right on the face of the water. We do not have the sufficient embedment materials here like you would in the Northeast or something else. Everything's built on friction piles. We drive a lot of piles here. Every project around here is that. And I would say, Barnett, that's one aspect of it. But even on the surface work, I joke with people that we're just renting the soil around here because it's kind of moving and shifting. And again, I tout Ed's performance. He was able to develop or do the research and help substantiate certain materials for temporary application. And we've done about 7 acres or so of stabilization, and I'll use it. It's called an OPF 42, and I know several of you on there are certainly familiar with it. But to get a port to kind of understand as a governmental entity, traditionally it's always flexible base material, or then you do flexible base with a topping of, HMAC, asphalt topping. And this, we were able to meet our goals and put the material down rapidly. And it's that type of material technology that we're looking to develop. Is how can we, and that's one of the shortages that the port has, is insufficient amount of laydown space. We've got business opportunities, but it comes down to acquiring additional property and then stabilizing those areas. So those are 2 examples, and I'll give you 2 more real quick. One is reuse materials. crushed concrete, recycled crushed concrete or something like that as a potential use as we perhaps take out an existing structure or slab or piles, what to use that material for other than to just cart off. Can they be reused? And the one that's probably the nearest and dearest to my heart is silt. And the port is dredging 2 to 3 times a year. We've got a lot of alluvial deposition that happens along the port. We think there's 4 or 5 other reasons: bank sloughing, traffic activity, deep draft traffic activity, and it's what to do with the silt. I mean, right now, what we're doing is we mobilize a dredge, and there's a substantial fee associated with that. There's a substantial fee associated with moving it, whether it be slurried and moved to a placement area or elsewhere. And one of the things that the Sabine Neches Waterway benefits from is having an unbelievable amount, and it's hats off to the Sabine Neches Navigation District to having sufficient placement areas. You get over in the Houston area, they're severely limited. In the federal role, the Corps limits the areas you can place that only the federal channel can place, and private placement is very, very expensive. We've got this benefit where you could essentially take a volume like what's been dredged out to do the Panama Canal and can place it here and still have capacity. It's at that level. That's one of the keys that I think that our area has for future development is there is available land. Now it's getting fewer and fewer developable industrial lands. We've got available water as a resource, and then labor and capital are another 2 components of it. But that's a little bit of a long-winded way because it's a multi-layered way to look at. And like Sina's example of permeable concrete for water, we live in I think it's the 2nd wettest county in Texas, so water's not a problem here. We've got plenty of it. We just don't know what to do with it. And in traveling to foreign ports, a lot of them have pavers because they do not have the capability of conventional concrete that we have. It is like I see it as a luxury here after traveling to a lot of other ports. But how do you get rid of that water? And a lot of people want the water that rolls off of there to be treated before it goes back into a waterway. And still, the way it exists today, there's really just there's no surface treatment. It just pretty much goes into the river. So it's multi-level, Vernon, and I see that there's a lot of opportunities in there for study. Roundabout way to answer your question that to me, silt matters and dirt happens, but water has a lot to do with it.
Thank you, Larry.
So as we focus on the process and looking at lessons learned and best practices, Dean Craig has had a great deal of experience working with private sector on problem solving. So Dean Craig, would you weigh in with your perspectives, please?
Sure. Thanks, Eric, and thank you, Larry and Sina. The good news is, I guess, I'm going to repeat a lot of what has already been said. The bad news is I'm going to repeat a lot that's already been said. But looking from a university perspective, it's important, that we look at it at challenges and projects, from an industry perspective. But at the end of the day, one of our primary products that we turn out are students, and both universities and industry understand that we can graduate better job-ready graduates when we partner with industry in one form or fashion, whether it's through the co-op aspect or obviously through research and bringing students in on these projects. We also know that industry-university collaborations do falter from time to time. The good news is they falter from issues that probably can be avoided. And communication, understanding each other's needs, is important to some extent. So just a few points that I wanted to make from a university perspective. When I say we, I'm talking about universities and particularly Lamar, obviously. We need to understand that oftentimes industry rules are a little bit different. working collaboratively across disciplines, at universities may be a little bit foreign. From time to time, we try to do a good job of supporting projects that do support across discipline work, but sometimes to more limited success. Where industry, oftentimes, every project is across disciplines. The pace of work, I try to always remind our faculty and students that we need to have a sense of urgency. Larry talked about deadlines, and that's exactly what I'm getting at. We oftentimes I'll see presentations that faculty and students give to industry, and it's 30 minutes before they get to the point. I try to convince that industry doesn't really need to see the p-values and all the other things that went into the solution or the recommendations that you come up with. So, tell industry what time it is and not how to make the watch, basically. They're hiring, they hire us to provide a service, a value-added service, and hopefully trust us to get there the right way. Us being flexible. An example of that is some of the agreements that we negotiate with industry, whether it's non-disclosures, having a kind of a friendly, vague non-disclosure when we can, not requiring separate contracts for everything that we do for the same organization, by use of like master service agreements are very useful. The agreements when it comes to patents, these are often sticking points that we can certainly work through. Lamar has improved that process immensely over the years. Universities, we need to have our own story ready. What is Lamar? What services can we provide? But we also need to be willing and ready to listen to the prospective client, customer, company. We need to, look at our solutions from a business standpoint. Will the innovation actually bring value to the company versus maybe, creating a solution that's looking for a problem. That's a little tongue-in-cheek, but furthering that, closing the outcome impact gap. Industry-university collaborations often produce really cool and interesting outcomes. No doubt about that. I think Larry mentioned, some of those things, but, do these outcomes produce any true impact for that company? Does, a technical paper or a publication or new computer codes or whatever, they may be a great finding from a pure research perspective, and Sina touched on this, but may have limited or no impact to the organization. And at the end of the day, industry-based research needs to add value to that organization. There's obviously a space for fundamental research that may or may not include industry, but what I'm speaking of specifically is industry-university collaborations. It's great if you can find a champion within the industry that you choose to work for, and I heard Larry volunteer for that. Thank you, Larry. To help promote your ideas through the organization. My, philosophy about that, or about working with industry, your personal your contact that I may have in an organization, if I can, what I call, keep him or her in the green, then they are going to keep coming back and hiring me. And when I say in the green, this is for organizations who have performance ratings that are like a street light, green, yellow, red. And if a person with their performance review or the projects, they're often rated this way as well. If we can keep them in the green, then they're going to come back to us, time and time again. And I guess I got off started without introducing myself. I'm the Dean of Engineering here at Lamar. And most of the work that I've done over the years has been industry-based work. It's my love. It's what I enjoy doing. I like helping solving problems. I've actually had a relationship with the American Bureau of Shipping for about 20 years. And I attribute that because I keep my contacts at ABS in the green. So, it's kind of like, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours kind of thing. I mentioned that, I've had this long-term relationship with ABS and others, but that's the longest relationship I've had. That's really what benefits university industry collaborations are these longer-term relationships, a actual true sense of partnership. I feel like I almost feel like I'm an employee of ABS as much as we communicate over the years about a variety of things. But that's important in the sense that with this closer partnership, an organization may be more willing to share how this project fits into kind of the strategic plan of the organization, and gives the researchers maybe a little better appreciation of, what are the goals, and how this project fits into that. So to wrap up, merely talking a good game, isn't sufficient, but it's the sense of urgency. It's following up on actions, and continuing these relationships in more of a partnership type way is the way that I see a lot of the success. So with that, as others, I'll be happy to answer questions. But before I do, I saw that Dr. Zhu had raised his hand some time back, and I was going to open it up to you, Dr. Zhu.
Thanks,
Uh,
Brian.
Yeah, actually, I have a question for Larry. Yeah. So Larry, you mentioned like TCEQ in your talk. So I just wondering what kind of major environmental concerns you the port have, and what kind of the major pollution source. The other one is you mentioned the resilience. So can you extend it a little bit?
Yes, sir. Thank you for the question, Dr. Zhu. We have an ongoing regular relationship with TCEQ, and I'll expand it a little bit with the General Land Office for Texas, because one event can translate into the other's responsibility very quickly. Categorically, the Port of Port Arthur does not pollute. No, but we do have on site. Think about it. If we have a vessel on the dock, and it could be something as simple as a prop shaft, and Eric worked as a port director earlier in his career, and something that somebody else's problem can become your problem very easily, and it would be our front yard. And so we certainly work to develop those relationships, but then we also have, in addition to that point source type, it's a mobile source potential, but even on site we have tenants, and some of the tenants can have they're just by their presence here necessitates air quality permitting. So we've been brought in, whether it wasn't by the port's creation, we're certainly a stakeholder to that, and ultimately we're the property owner. So just in helping manage tenant relationships or our own customer relationships, we find that there's a need to actively engage TCEQ. That's over and above what fundamental requirements exist for the port and on permitting stormwater and the other with the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. So those are things. And then also it comes down to, Doctor, when we permit, when we get ready to construct something, The lead agency on marine construction will be the Army Corps of Engineers to deciding on the permitting document. But in that, all the government entities, the alphabet soup I listed, have an opportunity for input. And so we're engaged on several different levels with someone like Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. And I think that was the first part of your question. And forgive me, what was the second part, sir?
Resilience. You mentioned like the public management wide, the port resilience. What exactly?
Yes, sir. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I'll tell you, marine structures. I mentioned design lives of 50 plus years as a basis point. We do talk in terms of what will the next 50 or 100 years look like, and depending on what part where the marine structure is located, I'm gonna generalize a little bit to the United States. Climate change or sea level rise is really kind of on our front burner, and there are impacts to this area, and so we are certainly cognizant of that. Resiliency for us, and it's just the bare bones of what does it look like where there seems to be an increased frequency of storms, and you can look at 2020 as an example, and I think frequency and severity are two measures, and then how do we plan for that? And you raise a really good question, because we're right in the middle of something that was politically motivated, but it has operational impacts of this levee raise that happens between Sabine to Galveston with the Army Corps of Engineers. Our port facility is built, part of it is built directly on top of a flood protection levee, and part of that levee also bisects the port. So resiliency for us, we're on the front lines when it comes to a level rise or to storm activity, like the frequency of hurricanes that we've experienced. And when I talk frequency, I'm not just talking about Laura and Delta and all the alphabet soup. I wasn't in a college fraternity. I was in the one that you had to go work every day. So I didn't know I learned a lot more about my Greek alphabet this year, given the volume of storms that we had, right? But if you look back, as a child growing up in Southeast Texas, I was an adult. I mean, it was like a 40-year period without any substantial storms. And then I go back to, say, Hurricane Rita and Ike. And so we've seen these devastating storms that happen. Maybe it was just our turn in the barrel. But when we talk in terms of resiliency, those are some of the things we think of on the waterfront. And to protect our customers' product, we have to have a really good roof over our head. And this is something Sina and I have worked together on, is how do we improve that and make them resilient? Because we have to be operating before, almost during, and then very much after we experience a storm. We do not have the luxury of remain shut down for extended periods of time. Customers need their product, and commerce has to happen. So resiliency is a very important issue to us. And I think you talk about cross-pollination or cross-functionality. I think there's a good segment in here to where the business department and engineering can certainly work together on a response when it comes to resiliency, because we also can't spend down the farm. We're a tax-based entity. We derive most of our revenue off of our labor and our work, but we do have taxpayer support. So we also have to be very cognizant of that. We do have access to bond markets for funding, but we use that sparingly. Dr. Chu, I hope that addresses your question.
Sure. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, sir. Larry. As I think both of you, I think all three, Sina, Larry, and Brian have talked about ways to more effectively collaborate with consulting firms, as well as resolve the issues in front of the client. Larry, I think you were talking about the goal of the academic, the research team is for peer-reviewed research papers. And I think Brian mentioned this as well. The goal of the client is to resolve the problem. I'm really like us to focus on the remaining time that we have on how do we identify and make sure that we're communicating and effectively delivering the goals of the client, I'd also like perhaps a little discussion on that academia and the consulting industry can effectively collaborate. There is some concern, I think, on the part of consulting firms that academia is actually competitive, and while that may be true in some cases, I think we should focus on how we can achieve both the goals of both sides. If any of you could address that and discuss how do we approach these research projects in a way that gives us repeat business, among other things.
I'll be happy to start that off. I think the number one thing is exposure. We need to we need to get a lot closer to the people that we're trying to attract, such as these refineries, petrochemicals, the ports. There are a lot of people here that are not really that exposed to Lamar University. And of course, unfortunately, with the COVID going on right now, that limits a lot of us and being able to get together in a more productive way. But I believe that there should be a little bit more concentrated effort in inviting people to Lamar to see the laboratories, to see the facilities that we have, and get them more exposed to our students and to the programs that we have going on. It's kind of difficult to go out there and as the university, if you don't have a really good idea of what a client needs, which a lot of these clients are fairly by contract and by nature, they're kind of secretive in a lot of things that they do. They're not going to advertise them because of the competition. However, if Lamar would expose themselves to some of these clients, then they feel a lot more comfortable bringing their issues to you. And then that identifying the issues makes it a lot easier in how to help them solve the problems they have and how to partner with them. So hopefully after this Corona stuff dies down a little bit, we can start having some marketing, some meetings just like this, inviting the industry to sit in and listen to our professors and or invite them to see our laboratories, invite them to understand our programs. That would really help us in getting into those places and be more collaborative with them. Thanks,
Sina. Any other comments?
I would completely agree with Sina, and kind of Eric, to address your question. I do not visualize or see a conflict at all, and where one takes from the other. I think one complements the other, because I'll tell you, at the end of the day, if we're going to go build something, or we're going to design something, we look to a professional engineer that has a firm to design. It's not going to change, and it doesn't take away. However, I think a lot of the decision making that gets that professional engineer, I'm using engineering as an example, to gets them across the goal line, maybe there's a fact finding. And I think our SILT effort that we're working on is kind of going out there. What's the available information? And I'm going to use my SILT example that we're working with Lamar on. We've got an unbelievable amount of data that I have absolutely no capability or interest in going through and sorting through, but we need really smart people to kind of help us out on it. And we go through, and I can give a thumbnail guess, but we need somebody behind it with credentials and knowledge to be able to take a look at that. And I think whatever comes out of that study will only complement any actions that we take, as far as do we go buy a dredge? Do we have a better way of handling this? I see where one is complementary to the other. And I'm gonna say this from a very selfish point of view. When I go out and engage at a Chamber of Commerce function, or speak to an organization, and I look out in that crowd and I'm meeting the individuals that are looking to advance their career, regardless of age or capability, I'm out there looking. And I know Cena's a smart guy. He's always on the recruit too. So you're looking for that talent all the time, because human capital, to me, is the most important part of all of this, is trying to find those smart minds. And I think that's a way for a student, professors themselves, all to kind of distinguish themselves without a doubt.
Thanks, Larry. I'm going to turn to a non-engineering perspective. George Saltzman, would you kind of weigh in? You've had some very successful projects with some of the big IT firms globally. What are the keys to success in terms of responding to their needs from your perspective?
Hi, everybody. I'm George Saltzman. I work next door to Eric in the Center for Educational Innovation and Digital Learning. We have absolutely nothing to do with ports or engineering, but I've been an invited guest or a trespasser into the ports industry. So thanks for that. Eric, the big thing I wanted to share is, from my perspective, the difference with industry related research, the kind of thing that I have to focus on is the way the success is measured. When I'm working as an academic, I'm measured by publications, the quality of the publications, the number of citations, all that stuff. When I'm working with industry, none of that matters. For industry, for my research project to be useful, it has to be used. I have to be focused on the practicality, the application of that. So in the project that you mentioned, we've been working on a very large project with Apple. The total scope of the project, I think, is now 100 million. We're pulling in several million of that, working in Houston and Austin and all other places around the country. In the research that we're focused on is very driven towards how they can advance a process, how they can advance a product, or how they can solve a problem. And I always have to keep coming back to looking at those, like in that research capacity, thinking about, so what is it that I'm trying to do? Am I trying to help them with the product? Am I trying to help them with the process? Or am I trying to solve some sort of a problem? So, I guess one of the things that we keep looking at is we definitely have subject level expertise. But they definitely have some context that I don't have. I will never understand their business the way that they do. And so I have to keep talking with them to try to understand how can my academic domain fit within the context of their business. And the only way you can do that is by opening up and having lots of conversations like this roundtable. I mean, every time I hear somebody like Larry talk about the business of ports, I learn a lot more about it that I didn't know before. And I think that's the most important thing from my perspective, Eric, as a researcher, is I just have to keep listening to what the clients are looking for, what they're asking for, and figure out what I can do to bring that in. And I put some little notes down. I'm about, our center is about trying to build a portfolio of assets that can be deployed into industry. And so I have to think like a consultant. What can I have that provides value back to the industry? So I don't know. I feel somewhat unqualified to even answer that question with people like Brian and Vic Zaloom on here, but that's my perspective.
Thanks, George. Well, you mentioned Vic. Vic, you've had a great deal of success, and we talked about the channel improvement project here, working with the navigation district and others. Any keys to a successful collaboration, not only with industry client, but with the private consulting sector? Vic, I think you're on mute.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay. One of the things that the faculty need to certainly understand, and I think this has been brought out by everybody, but maybe I can say it in a little different way, is that there's a difference between a grant, which is when we apply for a research project from the federal government or from state government. A grant sort of implies a gift, right? Okay. And so you send in a very detailed proposal for a grant, and they like your idea, so they give you money. And then you go and you kind of develop this idea and you write a final report, and you don't communicate a whole lot in between. That's the difference between a grant now and a project or a contract. When we deal with somebody like Larry, who is an industry participant, or someone like AVS, which Brian's been working with for years and years, or Sabine Natchez Navigation District, or ExxonMobil for that matter, they're an industry client and we have a contract. That contract calls for deliverables on a timeline, and so we have to understand that. And one of my things is, as a project manager, I have to keep reminding the faculty that work with me, that are usually the technical experts, this is not a grant. This is not a federal or state research grant. This is a contract, and this is we have to deliver value, as Larry said very succinctly, to this customer. So that's my perspective. Thank you for calling on me. I go way back with, in fact, I go so far back with so many people. I'm just glad to be here, with Larry and with Sina. Larry, I think you were still with industry when I first met you at SETWAC meetings.
Yes, sir, that's correct. And I remember first meeting you as a student. Now I will say I didn't have a slide rule.
And Sina, I introduced you when you won the Lamar University Distinguished Alumni Award. I remember I used the Beatles song, Imagine. Imagine if you were an international student and you didn't know the language, and how you have accomplished all you have under all of those very trying circumstances. But I was kind of lucky to get into the maritime business in the sense that right after 9/11, President Bush created the Homeland Security Department, and they had sent out a request for people to serve on the National Maritime Security Advisory Committee. And I had no idea about this request, but the system office in Austin had apparently been knowledgeable about this request, and they came to me and they said, why don't you send in an application? And I sent it in. You filled out this form. In fact, I think because I applied for that, I ended up, somebody got, they broke into the federal system for those, the what do you call it? Those people that steal your identity. And I think I ended up losing my identity because of that. But anyway, I was the only person in academia selected for that committee. All of the other people were shippers, port people, all this kind of stuff. And so I learned a lot by serving on that committee for 3 years. And then I served on SETWAC. And that's really where I learned about Sabine Natchez and importance and all of the things that were going on. I served on the Port Security Committee for SETWAC. And, so I think in order to be able to provide the deliverables to a customer, you have to be in constant contact with the customer. And that's something I mentioned to Larry also, is that we're really, as a university, sometimes that's not what we're cut out to be, because we've got these semesters, that we have to deal with. And meeting deadlines is tough. Fortunately, I had, for this benefit cost analysis, I had Alberto working on it, and he stays up all night anyway. So he just worked and worked and worked. And so we got it done. And fortunately, Larry's proposal was so good that our BCA didn't ruin it. So they got it funded. I just, you know, the communication, I think, is critical. We don't have to do that when we get a grant, a federal grant, or even a state grant to do research. You got a great idea. We're going to give you some money. Take the money and run with it and give us a final report. That's not the way it works with contracts. Contracts are totally different. And I am a little bit sensitive to the issue of competing with people like Cena. We don't want to do that. I mean, that's not our business. And so I'd love to collaborate more than we have probably, but and we certainly do collaborate in the sense of providing talent, graduates that Cena can hire and do the kinds of things he does. The other thing I'd like to mention is, you know, every engineering discipline has a 2-semester senior project, and those students become much more valuable employees if they work on something that's really relevant, and they can get introduced to an industry. It's a way that an industry can get a look at a person that's going to graduate within the next few months, less than a year, generally speaking, and get a look at that person or a team of people and be able to maybe find some talent there. And also hopefully get a project result that's good. So anybody that's online from industry, just know that. But they always start in the fall, they always end in the spring, so they're very restricted on when you can do those kinds of things. So it has to be something that you'd like to do, but it doesn't really have a timeline on it that, you know, that doesn't meet that sequence, because we have to operate on a semester system. So I think those are the things that I'd like to say. I don't think it's anything new, but it's a different perspective maybe than other people would have known.
Thanks, Vic. So much to cover. I think we hit some great points. Communication is clearly key. Understanding the goals and expectations of your client, of your private consulting firm partner, and they of the research team coming out of the university. That two-way understanding, I think, is critical. We are approaching the end, or just past the end of our scheduled time. I welcome any last comments. If we have those, otherwise I will thank Larry and Cena for their participation, and all of you for weighing in with your perspectives on this important topic. And I think it's something that for which the dialogue needs to continue. So any last comments that I'm not seeing any?
Looks like Alberto has a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Thank you, Dr. Marquez.
Good morning. I just wanted to point my perspective regarding the projects and why is it kind of difficult for us academics to approach those projects. And that is, in my experience, projects are very focused on, oriented towards these tasks that need to be done, but those are not necessarily understood by the faculty, because the faculty are experts in one or two aspects. And it is like if we have a hammer and everything starts to look like a nail. And that is probably, I think, the most challenging part on our side. And I think that is solved by say engineering firms or consulting firms by the fact that they have more versatility or the capacity to change from one topic to the next one. We would need to learn how to do that, and particularly in the College of Engineering, it would be important to have a good understanding of what are the real capabilities of the faculty so we can integrate a team faster towards these projects, because I think sometimes maybe there are opportunities that could be taken advantage of if we understand the true capabilities of the faculty on one hand, and on the other hand, from say the port, when we work, I have worked in both for projects with the Port of Bowman and Port of Port Arthur. And I think because the task was very specific and was very clear, we could move forward fast enough, even though, as Dr. Loom was saying, we had to work overnight because some of these cases come really like you need to have it in 2 weeks type of delivery. And in order to achieve that, of course, we depend a lot on the information that the ports have, but it is also successful because it's very clear what we want to do. And that's not always the case when we're defining, well, we just have a problematic situation and we need to narrow it down. So it's important to narrow it down to a confined project. Otherwise, the faculty, because of their own expertise, are going to start kicking it at one side and the other side of the court because they have this particular set of interests and they look at the problem in their own way. So that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you, Alberto. In respect for your time, we'll take one more question. I see Captain Gant has his hand up. Captain Gant, please.
Yes, good morning. It's just a question, and just to kind of give it this question to the speaker. Can you guys hear me loud and clear?
Yes, thank you.
My question is it still safe to say to the speakers that we're still dependent on practices and methods from engineers, research utilized since the 19th and 20th century, such as dredging and problems dealing with the silt?
Yes. in brief, and that's one of the, and I think there's a couple things that are going on there, Captain, that you've got a monopsony, for lack of a better word, that exists, and I think that there's been limited innovation, and that's just my personal opinion. In practicality, you find that federal contracting can either tie up or bottle up resources, so the timing of the application can be severely impacted as well. And that, that's pretty linear, but it does create a significant challenge to be able to do what we're supposed to do, discharge a vessel or load a vessel to its desired depth. So no, you bring up an excellent point. I think there's a lot of room for innovation in that area, and what I look at is just in my front yard essentially, but I think as an industry, and when you bring up to the industry that there needs to be more capacity, it's quickly no, there's sufficient capacity, and Eric, I see you shaking your head because you see this and you've experienced this probably in your working career in ports too. I think it's certainly worth study because it's a very expensive dynamic, and then the downstream effect of it is what do you do with the placement? How do you test the placement? How, if something floated in front of your dock that was a questionable compound or chemical, how do you treat that, and how do you go back to a point source on it? No, it's a very complex discussion. Excellent question.
Thanks, Captain. Thanks, Larry. Thanks, Sina, for you guys taking the time. Thanks all for taking the time to participate in a topic that I think, as I said, deserves a continued conversation. We will have a our last webinar from the center's sponsorship perspective on the December 8th that will focus on asset management, Larry, and we'll have a number of ports talk about the benefits that have accrued to them as they developed the business process, which is asset management. As I said, that will be on December 8th, and we'll send out a notice on that. But thank you again for your time and participation. Any follow-up questions or comments, please reach out to me or Candace, and we'll see if we can't get an answer. But thanks again. You all have take good care and have a great day.
Thank you very much. Bye.